They hung my mom on a tree. Save her. Little girl begged Duke what he did next. A muddy country lane in the English countryside. Rain had turned the road to soup, and Duke Nathaniel Rowe's carriage lurched through another pothole. He barely noticed. At 53, he'd grown weary of society games, of smiling through empty conversations, of pretending grief had an expiration date. His wife had been gone 7 years, and still, people told him to move on as though love were a coat you simply took off. The carriage jolted to a sudden stop. "Your Grace," his driver shouted. "There's a child." Before Nathaniel could respond, a small figure appeared at the window, a girl of perhaps 9, barefoot and covered in mud, her face streaked with tears and terror. She pounded on the carriage door with tiny fists, her voice breaking with sobs. "Please. They hung my mom on a tree. Save her. Please, sir, please." Nathaniel's heart seized. He threw open the door and jumped down, his polished boots sinking into the mud. "Where? Show me quickly." The girl, Clara Hale, grabbed his hand with surprising strength and pulled him off the road, through a gap in the hedgerow, into an orchard. Branches tore at Nathaniel's coat as he followed, his driver close behind with a lantern. Then he saw her. A woman hung from an apple tree, rope around her neck, body limp. Everything about the scene screamed suicide, the kind of tragedy that happened too often in hard times. But Nathaniel's eyes, trained by years of managing an estate and its problems, caught details others might miss. "Hello, lovely. If you're enjoying this tale of deception, courage, and unexpected rescue, tap like, leave a quick comment, and subscribe so YouTube knows to bring you more stories you'll enjoy. And if you're up for it, tell me your first name or where you're watching from in the comments. I read every note, and it always brings a smile to my face." The woman's sleeves were torn at the cuffs. Her wrists bore fresh bruises, dark against pale skin. A broken branch lay nearby, snapped recently. The ground showed signs of struggle, heel marks dragged through mud. And there, half buried in leaves, a fine leather glove, the kind no farmer or laborer could afford. "Cut her down," Nathaniel commanded. Carefully. His driver produced a knife. Together they lowered the woman as gently as possible. Nathaniel pressed his fingers to her throat, his hands shaking. Nothing. He tried again, adjusting his position. There. Faint, but unmistakable. A pulse. "She's alive." He turned to his driver. "Ride for the village doctor. Now. And send for the constable. Tell them Duke Rowe requires immediate assistance." As the driver mounted and galloped away, Nathaniel loosened the rope carefully, checking for breathing. The woman, Miriam Hale, was perhaps mid-40s, with work-worn hands and a face that spoke of dignity despite circumstance. Clara knelt beside her mother, small hands hovering, afraid to touch. "Is she? Will she?" "She's breathing," Nathaniel said gently, removing his coat to cover Miriam. "You were very brave to find help. What's your name?" "Clara. Clara Hale." "That's my mum, Miriam." The girl's voice steadied slightly, finding courage in having done something. "She didn't do this. She wouldn't leave me. Someone hurt her." "I believe you," Nathaniel said, and meant it. The evidence spoke clearly to anyone willing to look. "Do you know who?" Clara's face scrunched in thought. "Mum's been angry lately. She found something wrong in the rent books when she was helping check Papa's old accounts. Papa died last year," she added matter-of-factly, the way children did when grief had become ordinary. "Mum said someone was stealing from the tenants." Before Nathaniel could ask more, Miriam gasped, her body convulsing as consciousness returned. Her eyes flew open, wild with confusion and fear. She tried to sit up, hands going to her throat. "Clara." Her voice was raw, desperate. "I'm here, Mum." Clara grabbed her mother's hand. "Don't move yet," Nathaniel said firmly but kindly. "The doctor is coming. You're safe." Miriam's eyes found his face, registering the quality of his clothing, the authority in his voice. "You're the Duke." "I am. And you're coming to the manor until we understand what happened here." "No." Miriam's voice was hoarse but fierce. "I won't be Charity. I won't." "You'll be safe," Nathaniel interrupted. "Someone tried to kill you and stage it as suicide. Until I know who and why, You and your daughter are under my protection. The village doctor arrived, a practical man named Henderson who examined Miriam with gentle efficiency. Behind him came Constable Webb, a large man with a carefully neutral expression. Terrible business, Webb murmured, looking at the scene. Poor woman. The despair some feel these days. This wasn't despair, Nathaniel said sharply. Look at her wrists. The torn sleeve. The struggle marks. This was an attack. Webb's expression became guarded. That's a serious accusation, Your Grace. Mrs. Hale here has been making quite a fuss lately about the estate accounts. Some might say she's been causing trouble. Some might say someone wanted her silenced, Nathaniel replied coldly. As the doctor helped Miriam to her feet, Nathaniel heard hoofbeats. Silas Vane, his estate steward, arrived with suspicious speed, his face arranged in perfect concern. Your Grace, I heard there was an incident. How dreadful. Vane's eyes flicked to the orchard, to the rope, to Miriam with an expression Nathaniel couldn't quite read. Poor Mrs. Hale. The strain of widowhood can be so difficult. Indeed, Nathaniel said, watching Vane carefully, though perhaps not as difficult as discovering theft. Something shifted in Vane's face, there and gone in a heartbeat. I'm sure I don't understand, Your Grace. Then we'll discuss it tomorrow. Tonight, Mrs. Hale and her daughter will stay at the manor. See that the West Wing rooms are prepared. Vane's smile didn't reach his eyes. Of course, Your Grace. Most generous. As they left the orchard, Nathaniel glanced back once. That glove, expensive and out of place. The boot prints too fine for a farmhand. And Vane's arrival, far too quick, as though he'd been nearby. Or checking his work. If you're enjoying this story, I'd be so grateful for a like and subscribe. It helps me bring you more stories you'd love. 1. Miriam Hale woke in a bed softer than clouds, surrounded by walls that belonged in paintings, not real life. For a confused moment, she thought she'd died. Then her throat throbbed with pain, and memory crashed back. The rope. The darkness. Clara's face. Clara. Miriam sat up too fast, the room spinning. A stern-looking woman in housekeeper's black appeared instantly at her bedside. Your daughter is perfectly well, eating breakfast like a small locust, Mrs. Bridget Sloane said crisply. Lie back down before you faint and cause me more work. I need to see her. You need to rest. Doctor's orders. Mrs. Sloane adjusted pillows with efficient hands. The child has eaten more in one meal than seems physically possible. She's fine. Despite the stern words, there was something almost gentle in the housekeeper's manner. Miriam sank back, her body betraying her with weakness. A knock at the door, and the Duke entered, followed by his butler carrying a tea tray. Nathaniel looked tired, as though he'd slept poorly, and there was something in his eyes that made Miriam's defenses rise. Not pity exactly. Recognition, perhaps. Understanding. How are you feeling? He asked. Like someone tried to kill me, Miriam said bluntly. Thank you for yesterday. Clara and I will return home today. No. Miriam's eyes flashed. You cannot keep me here. I can, actually. Someone attempted murder and staged it as suicide. Until I know who and why, you're both safer under my roof. Nathaniel sat in the chair beside her bed uninvited. Mrs. Hale, I am not holding you hostage. I'm offering protection. There's a difference. Protection that will destroy my reputation. A widow alone in the Duke's manor. The gossip will be vicious. Let them gossip. Better gossip than dead. Miriam wanted to argue, but exhaustion and pain made thinking difficult. Why do you care? Nathaniel was quiet for a moment. My wife died 7 years ago. People kept telling me to move on, as though grief was something you simply finish. As though love had a deadline. He met her eyes. I understand what it means to lose someone and keep standing. I won't let someone knock you down for it. The unexpected honesty disarmed her. Miriam, who'd learned not to trust kindness, found herself believing him. The door burst open. Clara entered like a small storm, her mouth rimmed with jam, followed by the butler attempting dignity. I apologize, Your Grace, Mr. Hargreaves said dryly. The young lady has consumed 4 biscuits, 2 scones, and is now testing the structural integrity of a meat pie. I was hungry, Clara said, unrepentant. She climbed onto her mother's bed. Are you really a duke, sir? Or just a very clean man in a big house? Despite everything, Miriam felt her lips twitch. Nathaniel's face remained serious, though his eyes warmed. I am technically a duke, he admitted. Though I've been called worse than very clean man. Clara, Miriam said weakly, apologize. For what? It was a real question. Hargreaves coughed into his hand, hiding what might have been a smile. Mrs. Sloane made a sound of exasperation that didn't quite mask fondness. Over the next hours, as Miriam's strength slowly returned, the truth emerged in pieces. Her late husband had helped with estate accounts before his death. Miriam, who had a head for numbers, had continued reviewing them. She'd found discrepancies. Rent payments recorded but never reaching the manor books. Tenants charged mysterious fees that shouldn't exist. Men falling into debt for obligations that seemed to appear from nowhere. I told Mr. Vane, Miriam said, her voice growing stronger. Asked him to explain the differences. He was very kind. Very understanding. Said he'd look into it. Her face hardened. 3 days later, someone tried to kill me. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. Vane. His trusted steward for 8 years. The man who managed everything, who knew every tenant, every transaction. A knock interrupted them. Constable Webb entered, his expression carefully apologetic. Mrs. Hale, I'm afraid I must ask you some difficult questions. He produced a silver brooch, tarnished but valuable. This was found in your cottage during a routine inspection. It matches the description of an item reported missing from the manor 3 weeks ago. Miriam stared. That's impossible. I've never seen it before. Several witnesses place you near the manor that day. I deliver eggs every Tuesday. Of course I was near the manor. Nevertheless, Webb said heavily, I must ask you to accompany me for formal questioning. This is absurd, Nathaniel said sharply. Constable, the woman nearly died yesterday. Which makes the timing unfortunate, Your Grace, but the law is the law. I must follow procedure. Webb's face suggested he wasn't happy about it, but his hands were tied by rules and expectations. As Clara clung to her mother's skirt, tears streaming, Miriam met Nathaniel's eyes with sudden understanding. They're not just trying to kill me. They're trying to destroy my credibility first. And she was right. If you're enjoying this story, I'd be so grateful for a like and subscribe. It helps me bring you more stories you'd love. 2. The hearing room at the market town was small, cold, and full of opinions masquerading as facts. The magistrate, a thin man named Crowley, sat behind a simple desk while villagers packed the benches, their faces showing everything from sympathy to suspicion. Miriam stood before them in borrowed clothes, her throat still bruised, her dignity intact. She refused to beg. Mrs. Hale, Magistrate Crowley began, you stand accused of theft and are under suspicion regarding the circumstances of your injury. How do you answer? I was attacked, Miriam said clearly. Someone tried to hang me and make it look as though I'd done it myself. As for the brooch, I have never stolen anything in my life. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A woman whispered loudly, always thought she was too proud for her station. Nathaniel sat in the front row, flanked by a sharp-eyed London solicitor named Pemberton, who'd arrived on the morning train. Beside them, Clara fidgeted, her small face fierce with concentration. Pemberton leaned close to Nathaniel. Your Grace, I must advise caution. Your reputation. Hang my reputation, Nathaniel said quietly. Truth matters more. Vane testified next, all polished sympathy. Mrs. Hale did express concerns about the accounts, he admitted smoothly. Quite passionate about it, actually. Almost obsessive. I wondered if perhaps the strain of widowhood had affected her reason. Liar. Clara shouted, leaping to her feet. You have a face like you smell of lies. The room erupted. Magistrate Crowley banged for order. Even the clerk fought a smile. Young lady, Crowley said, trying for stern, you cannot. But he does. Clara insisted. And his horse was by our cottage that morning. I saw it. The one with the white sock on the front left leg. Vane's composure slipped for just a heartbeat. I'm sure the child is mistaken. Clara doesn't make mistakes about horses, Miriam said softly. She knows every animal in the district. Nathaniel had been investigating privately. Now he stood. Magistrate Crowley, I have evidence I'd like to present. He produced the leather glove found at the orchard scene. This is expensive leather, made by Harrison's of London. My steward Mr. Vane purchases his gloves there. I have the receipts. Vane's face paled. Many men use that shop. Indeed. But combined with boot prints that match Mr. Vane's riding boots, and this, Nathaniel laid out photocopied ledger pages, comparison of handwriting showing alterations in the estate accounts, a pattern emerges. A tenant named Whitley stood suddenly. I'll speak. Vane threatened me. Said if I talked about the extra fees, I'd lose my lease. Said widows like Mrs. Hale should be grateful for whatever crumbs they get. More villagers stood, stories spilling out. Threats. Intimidation. Missing money. The truth, once started, became a flood. That evening, after the magistrate had released Miriam pending further investigation, Nathaniel found her in the manor's library. She stood by the window, watching Clara play in the garden below. Thank you, Miriam said without turning. For the solicitor. The evidence. For believing me. You don't need to thank me for basic decency. Most people wouldn't call it basic. She turned to face him. But I can't stay here, Your Grace. The gossip. Let them gossip. You don't understand. For Clara's sake, I need to protect what's left of our name. Then don't let me rescue you, Nathaniel said quietly, echoing words she'd spoken to him earlier. Stand beside the truth. Let them see you're not ashamed because you've done nothing wrong. Miriam studied his face, seeing past the title to the man underneath. A man who'd loved and lost and kept standing. Like her. Your Grace. Nathaniel. In private, please just call me Nathaniel. Before she could respond, Hargreaves appeared in the doorway, his usual composure shaken. Your Grace, Miss Clara has disappeared from the garden. The blood drained from Miriam's face. Nathaniel moved instantly, calling for staff, organizing a search. Within minutes, a stable boy appeared with a folded note, delivered by a stranger. Nathaniel read it aloud, his voice tight. Drop the questions or the girl follows her mother. Miriam swayed. Nathaniel caught her arm, steady and sure. We will find her, he said. I promise you, Miriam. We will find her. If you're enjoying this story, I'd be so grateful for a like and subscribe. It helps me bring you more stories you'd love. 3. Night fell over the estate like a curtain, but Nathaniel moved with military precision. He'd sent for his most trusted groom, a man named Davies who'd served in the army. The village vicar, Reverend Mills, arrived within the hour, steady and dependable. And a retired sergeant from the nearby garrison, Thompson, who knew every inch of the countryside. Miriam insisted on coming. Nathaniel had tried to argue. That is my child, Miriam said, her voice steel wrapped in ice. I'm not staying warm while she's afraid. I will search until I drop, and you cannot stop me. He didn't try again. They gathered in the manor's study, maps spread across the desk. Davies pointed to locations. If Vane's behind this, he needs somewhere isolated but familiar. Somewhere he can control. The old ice house, Thompson said suddenly. Far edge of the estate, near the woods. Been abandoned for years. Only staff and longtime villagers would know it. Clara's clever, Miriam said, her voice shaking but determined. If she can, she'll leave signs. They set out with lanterns, the night air cold and damp. Nathaniel walked beside Miriam, matching her pace, ready to catch her if she stumbled. Neither spoke. Words seemed inadequate for the fear thrumming between them. The ice house loomed out of darkness, a stone structure half buried in earth, its door hanging crooked. Light flickered from within. Nathaniel raised his hand for silence. They approached carefully, Davies and Thompson flanking the entrance. Nathaniel pushed the door open. Clara sat in the corner, bound but unharmed, her eyes huge in the lantern light. Vane stood near her, holding a pistol with shaking hands. Stay back. Vane's polished demeanor had cracked completely. I didn't want this. She was supposed to stop asking questions. The hanging was supposed to look real, supposed to end it quietly, by terrorizing a child. Nathaniel's voice was cold as winter. By attempting murder? You don't understand. The debts, the payments, I had no choice. The tenants were easy marks, and no one noticed for years. Vane's desperation showed in every word. Then she started looking at the books. She wouldn't leave it alone, because people were suffering, Miriam said, stepping forward despite Nathaniel's warning hand. Families losing homes because of your greed. Put down the pistol, Vane, Nathaniel commanded. It's over. Vane's hand trembled. For a moment, everything balanced on a knife's edge. Then he bolted for the back entrance. The lantern crashed as Vane fled, oil spreading across dry wood. Flames caught immediately, hungry and fast. Smoke filled the small space. Clara. Miriam ran forward, Nathaniel close behind. Davies and Thompson went after Vane, but Nathaniel's focus narrowed to one thing, getting Clara and Miriam out safely. He cut Clara's bonds with his pocket knife while Miriam gathered her daughter, both of them coughing in the smoke. The flames spread faster than seemed possible, cutting off the main entrance. The back way, Nathaniel shouted, leading them through the smoke. Behind them, they heard shouts. Thompson had tackled Vane in the clearing, and Davies was helping pin him down. They stumbled into cold night air, Miriam clutching Clara, both sobbing now that safety allowed it. Nathaniel made sure they were clear of the building before turning back to help his men drag Vane away from the burning structure. Vane fought weakly, then collapsed, all fight gone. In his coat pocket, Davies found a leather pouch stuffed with banknotes and a small account book filled with damning entries in Vane's own handwriting. The evidence was undeniable. Later, with Clara wrapped in blankets and drinking sweet tea that Mrs. Sloane had forced on her, with Vane in the constable's custody and the magistrate already contacted, Miriam found Nathaniel outside, watching the last of the icehouse smolder. "Thank you," she said simply. "You don't need to keep thanking me. I do, actually." Miriam moved closer. "But not for rescuing us. For standing beside the truth like you said. For not treating me like I was helpless." Nathaniel turned to face her, and in his eyes she saw something that made her heart skip. Not pity. Not even just respect. Recognition. Understanding. Connection. "Miriam," he said quietly, "I need you to know something. When I thought Clara might be hurt, when I imagined losing you both, I realized this wasn't just about justice anymore." Before she could respond, Clara appeared in the doorway, wrapped in her blanket like a small ghost. "Are you two going to stand there making moon eyes at each other, or can someone explain what happens next?" she demanded. "Because I'm very tired, and I'd like to know if we're staying or going." Miriam laughed, the sound startled out of her. Nathaniel smiled, genuine and warm. "We're staying," he said, looking at Miriam for confirmation. "If you'll have us." "I'll have to think about it," Miriam said, but her eyes said yes. "If you're enjoying this story, I'd be so grateful for a like and subscribe. It helps me bring you more stories you'd love. 4. 3 weeks later, the morning sun streamed through the manor's study windows as Miriam reviewed estate accounts with fierce concentration. Numbers that had once hidden theft now told clean, honest stories. Beside her, Nathaniel sorted correspondence. Vane had been formally charged with fraud, theft, intimidation, and attempted murder. The evidence was overwhelming. His trial at the assizes would be swift. But the real change was quieter. Nathaniel had ordered a complete audit of the estate accounts. Every transaction reviewed. Every fee explained. Every tenant given clear, written agreements. He'd established a widows' and orphans' fund through the parish church, ensuring families like Miriam's would never fall through the cracks again. And he'd offered Miriam a position, estate accounts clerk and stores supervisor. Not as a servant. As paid staff, with wages negotiated firmly across this very desk. Mrs. Sloane had been scandalized. Negotiating? With the Duke? "I won't be charity," Miriam had said firmly. "If I'm to work, I'll be paid fairly." Mrs. Sloane had pursed her lips. Then, quietly, "Good for you." Now, Miriam set down her pen and looked at Nathaniel. "The Whitley family's back rent has been forgiven. They're caught up now, and their lease is secure. Good. Nathaniel signed another letter. What about the Hendersons? They'll need another month, but they'll make it with the new terms. They worked in comfortable silence, the kind that came from understanding each other's rhythms. Clara was in the kitchen, supposedly helping cook but more likely eating everything in reach and telling elaborate stories about her adventure. You saved my life, the girl had told Hargreaves seriously yesterday. By feeding me. I was dying of starvation. You'd eaten an hour earlier, Miss Clara, Hargreaves had replied dryly. Exactly. Dying. The household had adapted to Clara's presence the way water adapted to stones, flowing around and over until she simply belonged. Mrs. Sloane scolded her daily. Hargreaves taught her chess. Davies let her help with the horses. And Nathaniel. Nathaniel had become something Miriam hadn't expected. Not a rescuer. Not a benefactor. A partner. Someone who listened when she spoke, who valued her opinions, who didn't mistake kindness for weakness. Miriam, Nathaniel said now, setting down his pen. I need to ask you something. She looked up, found him watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. These past weeks, working with you, talking with you and Clara, I've felt something I haven't felt in 7 years. He paused, choosing words carefully. Not excitement. Not grand passion. Something better. Home. Miriam's heart began beating faster. I'm not asking for immediate answers, Nathaniel continued. I know society will have opinions. I know people will gossip about the Duke and the widow he saved. He said the word with distaste. But I don't want to save you, Miriam. I want to stand beside you. I want to build something real together. You're proposing, Miriam said, not quite a question. Eventually. When you're ready. If you're ready. Nathaniel smiled slightly. I'm just declaring my intentions honestly. Like you taught me to do with the accounts. Despite the seriousness of the moment, Miriam laughed. That's possibly the least romantic proposal of intent I've ever heard. Is it working? She considered him, this man who'd proven himself through actions rather than words. Who'd risked his reputation to protect her. Who'd changed an entire estate's practices because it was right. Who treated her daughter with respect and kindness. Who made her feel seen. I've been alone a long time, Miriam said quietly. I've gotten good at it. Strong at it. I don't need rescue. I know. But, she continued, her voice softening, I'm very tired of being strong alone. Nathaniel reached across the desk, offering his hand. Miriam took it, feeling the warmth, the steadiness, the promise. The study door burst open. Clara stood there, covered in flour, grinning. Cook says to tell you the tarts are ready, and also I accidentally knocked over the flour bin, but it's definitely not my fault because someone left it in a very knockoverable place. She paused, seeing their joined hands. Are you two doing the mushy thing? Because if you are, I have opinions. Of course you do, Miriam said, smiling despite herself. What are they? Clara studied Nathaniel seriously. He looks like he'd fix a broken hinge without complaining. And he lets me steal biscuits. And he didn't let them hurt you. She nodded once, decisive. Keep him, Mum. Nathaniel blinked, then laughed, the sound genuine and surprised. That might be the best endorsement I've ever received. You're welcome. Can we have tarts now? Later, as evening painted the sky gold and pink, Nathaniel took Miriam back to the orchard. The one where everything had nearly ended. The tree where she'd hung had been cut down, the space cleared, and in its place, Nathaniel had ordered something new planted, a small apple tree, young and strong. I wanted this place to become something different, he said. Not where you nearly died. Where something new began to grow. Miriam touched the young tree's trunk, feeling bark rough under her fingers. Life continuing. Growth possible even after darkness. Miriam Hale, Nathaniel said formally, I'm not asking you to marry me today. But I am asking permission to court you properly. To stand beside you publicly. To build a future where Clara is safe, where your name is respected, where we face the world together. Not because you saved me, Miriam said, echoing his words. Because you stood back up, Nathaniel finished. Because you refused to be broken. Because you taught me that fairness matters more than tradition. Miriam looked at this man, this duke who'd proven himself human, who'd chosen truth over comfort, who saw her as an equal, not a project. Yes, she said simply. Yes to all of it. They didn't kiss. Not yet. That would come later, when she was ready, when the timing felt right. For now, they simply stood together in the orchard as the sun set, two people who'd survived their own kinds of darkness, choosing to face the light together. Behind them, Clara watched from the manor window, grinning triumphantly. Mrs. Sloane stood beside her, pretending to disapprove while secretly smiling. Hargreaves brought them both tea without being asked, because that's what good butlers did. And in the village, the story began to spread. Not about a duke who saved a helpless widow, but about two people who'd stood together against injustice. About a man who'd changed an unfair system. About a woman who'd refused to stay silent even when silence would have been safer. Some people would always gossip. Some would always disapprove. But others, those who mattered, saw the truth. That courage came in many forms. That love didn't need grand gestures, just steady presence. That sometimes, the best stories weren't about rescue at all. They were about respect. Partnership. Two people choosing each other honestly, with eyes wide open, building something real from the ashes of what tried to destroy them. And that, Clara would tell anyone who'd listen while stealing another biscuit, was a much better story anyway.